Hi, this is Jim from TrekWorld, and today I have a special treat. We have an update on what's been going on with a 3-foot model that showed up and then disappeared off eBay. Okay, so as most of you probably know, earlier this month, the 3-foot model of the Starship Enterprise that had been missing for well over 50 years roughly magically showed up on eBay and then just as magically disappeared afterwards. We finally have some concrete information about who has been doing what and what happens next. We also, unfortunately, have some prime examples of how rumors and urban legends get started. Now, the first up I want to talk about is our friend Rod Roddenberry actually issued a statement earlier this week to give us the lowdown on what's been going on. The statement was actually made through several outlets, but Trek Movie did a really good job of presenting it about, 3 days ago as I recorded this. Along with much of the Star Trek community, I was excited and pleased to learn that the original 3-foot filming model of the Starship Enterprise appears to have been discovered after being missing for decades, pending full authentication. I can confirm that I am now, through an intermediary, in contact with the individual who possesses the model. This prototype played a key role in the visualizing design of the famous television Starship during Star Trek's early development in 1964. Once the show went into production, the model was actually filmed in numerous visual effects shots seen throughout the life of the original Star Trek series, along with a larger 12-foot model that is currently displayed at the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum. I am convinced that this prototype model holds immense significance for Star Trek and its 58-year history. From its creation in the mid-1960s to about 1977, the model was in the possession of my father, Star Trek creator Gene Roddenberry. Unfortunately, it went missing after being loaned out during the production of Star Trek the Motion Picture. Beyond its physical value, the greater significance is this prototype Enterprise model really represents the underpinning ideas my father imbued on the series. That we are clever, resilient, and can learn from our mistakes. That we can and will move beyond archaic belief systems. And once we truly embrace the infinite diversity all around us, both in form and idea, we will then take those next steps into a prosperous and unlimited future. Guided by this principle, one of my primary goals over the past decade has been to locate, recover, and digitally archive significant Star Trek materials and artifacts through the Roddenberry Archive project. The intention would be to scan it in the finest detail for the Roddenberry archives and, after rigorous scrutiny, make it available to the public. Furthermore, I believe that a piece of such importance should not be confined to any private collection. This iconic artifact should be enshrined alongside the 12-foot shooting model at the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum, where it can serve to help tell the story of television history, the history of space exploration, and ultimately, a beacon of hope for the future. Rod Roddenberry. So I'd like to take the opportunity to actually deconstruct a few things here before we move on. First and foremost, we actually did see that Rod twice attributed the Smithsonian model to being 12 feet in length, and in reality it's 11 feet, or roughly 11 foot, 2 some inches. This is not actually an unusual occurrence for people who are close to Star Trek. Early books that were published right up through the 1990s quoted people from the original series, including Bob Justman and Herb Solow, saying that the model was 14 feet long. So there's a long-term history for this. The only reason I'm mentioning it is because if I don't, I'm going to get flooded with comments below by people saying that it's not a 12-foot, it's an 11-foot, and thinking that I read the quote wrong. The second thing I want to point out is I really like the idea that he believes it should not be in a private collection. As a result of that, I would not expect to see this go up for auction like so many other recent artifacts have. That does not mean that private collectors don't benefit Star Trek and the fandom. They most certainly do. A case in point would be Adam Schneider, who has been collecting Star Trek memorabilia, expensive Star Trek memorabilia, for quite a while now. And if it had not been for his passion for collecting Star Trek memorabilia, we would not have a completely restored Galileo shuttlecraft that has since then been displayed and recognized for its historical importance. We, Star Trek fandom, owe Adam and his wife a debt of gratitude we'll never be able to repay. Now, you'll also notice that he calls out the museum by name, in this case, Smithsonian. There's been a lot of discussion on the internet websites now about how it needs to be housed on a West Coast museum. The reason for that goes something like this. The original Star Trek tour sets, well, they're up in upstate New York in Ticonderoga. The Enterprise, of course, is in Washington, D.C. at the Smithsonian. The Neutral Zone Studios, where Star Trek Continues were filmed, is in Georgia, just outside Jacksonville. So if you are a West Coast Star Trek fan and you want to experience these specific pieces of history, the odds are it's a little bit difficult for you. So I can understand why having something like this on the West Coast would be more convenient for people over there. However, this is very, very different. There are very few museums in the world, with a possible exception of the Louvre, that have a demonstrated capacity to repair, restore, renovate, and recognize the integrity and emotional and historic value that the Enterprise model actually has. All you have to do is look at the restorations that have happened over the years by the Smithsonian, where literally no expense was spared to make sure that that model is preserved. Nobody else on the planet's going to do that, guys. It's got to go to the Smithsonian. And the third thing I want to punch out, just for quick here, is that the prose that Rod is using reminds me very much of Gene. Folks, Gene Roddenberry was easily the most charismatic man I have ever met in my life. He had this way of spinning a story verbally while you were there, and you not only bought the story, you invested emotionally in the story. You wanted that story to happen. He was a true visionary, and his ability to inspire that vision in other people is pretty much unmatched in modern history, in my opinion, when you're looking at the entertainment industry. Now, another statement had to be made this week, too, and this is the first time we'll see it. We'll talk about it again in a moment, too. But I contacted Gary Kerr, 2 days after I put up the video last, and sent him a message something along the lines of, I guess you're going to have a busy week, aren't you? And his first response back to me was, don't jump to conclusions. I've looked at the model, photographs, everything looks good, but it needs to be authenticated forensically before we can actually put our stamp of approval on it. But if it's not the model, I'll be shocked. However, rumors have been flying all over the place with quotes from Rod, from Gary, from Bill Krause, all these comments being out there and being attributed to them that have not actually come from them. And Gary has had to make a public statement. And one of the things that he did, which was really nice, was he gave a statement after looking at the Trek movie piece that they included as an update in their article. They've been really good at updating that article to make sure that it stays accurate as of the time that you're reading it. The truth is more mundane. Shortly after the news of the model's reappearance broke, several people started asking my opinion of it. After looking at the 16 photos posted online, I said the model looked like the real thing. But that's a far cry from, quote, authenticating, unquote, it, which would entail a full forensic examination of the model. Since then, I've made comparisons between high-res, fairly obscured photos of the model in the 1960s and the eBay photos. Tiny details in the model match perfectly. The eBay model is the real McCoy. I re-emphasize that this is simply my informed opinion, Gary Kerr. So the next thing that came out, which actually sort of surprised me, because I've never seen anything from the Dayton family before, but they chimed in on the article as well. And Noelle actually reached out, and she said, "This is the original 3-foot model built by my father, Richard C. Dayton. It was constructed from the original Matt Jeffries blue lines that our family donated to the Smithsonian, even though there was some discussion by my father that they should not have received them. There are photos of him presenting it to Gene on page 30 of the book I wrote, the Enterprise NCC 1701 of the model maker. The photo was taken by Richard Arnold in 1964. The business card on the bottom of the stand that it was put on for display on Gene's desk is his original business card at the time that we lived in North Hollywood. My father also wrote about the fact that it was a microphone stand that he used, which is shown in the current photos. So, the powers that be might want to confer with the family of the builder, Richard C. Dayton, for definite authentication. I may even have a piece left over from its construction. Noel Dayton McDonald. When I saw this, I was actually pretty excited on a couple things. One, was really neat to see that she actually responded, because I have suspected that she has been following things over the past few years whenever we're dealing with the 11-foot model, even though no one was talking to them. The second thing that I thought was really interesting was her last sentence. This is the first I've ever heard anybody say in over 50 years that there might be original construction materials left. It's just mind-blowing. Now, the next thing you see up here on the screen is just something I could not resist. Like Rod said in his quote, the 3-foot model had actually been filmed and was used in a lot of TV episodes of the series. I actually produced a video about that maybe a year and a half ago. It's the only video you'll find that actually takes you through episode by episode and shows you what new shots were introduced and then where else those shots were in other episodes. The video has actually been fairly popular, and I really want to thank Trek Movie. They actually included it at the base of their article, as you can see here from the screenshot. Talk about being surreal. So that's kind of neat, guys. I like that. Okay, well, we need to talk. There has been a lot of rumors floating around, and they showed up in the Trek Movie article. And we need to actually just remind people that we need to slow down and verify things before we say them. Sometimes we'll jump to conclusions, like Gary said. Other times, we just get confused. We all went to school and we probably experienced that one little thing that teachers did to us real early on when they were trying to demonstrate this principle to us in life. She would whisper a phrase into the ear of a student, who would then turn and whisper that phrase into the student beside them. And one by one, this phrase would move all the way across the room till it reached the last student, and she'd ask that last student, what was whispered in your ear? That student would say the phrase. Then she would ask the first student, what was it I whispered in your ear? And that student would repeat the phrase that she was given, and lo and behold, they didn't even match. Things grow, evolve, and change in the retelling. We really have to be cognizant of that, and I'm going to give you a few examples of how this can even happen today. There are multiple websites out there that contained the story and had information that was available to people to do research at the time. The particular website that I used was therpf.com. It's a modeling community that is run by, in my opinion, some of the most level-headed people I've ever seen. I've gone on other forums, other websites. There's usually a high level of drama involved. Very rarely is there drama here. These guys are actually pretty level-headed. They were the ones that posted the pictures from the eBay article after the eBay article had been pulled down. So they were, in fact, the ones I was able to get high-resolution photographs from originally. Since then, of course, in the day that followed, they became available all over the place. And they had some of the most in-the-know people, respected people, but things still go a little bit astray. Look at this quote that I have up here from Trek Movie. Many fans continued to pore over the photos from the eBay listing to attempt to verify the authenticity of the models. Rumors circulated that Enterprise expert Gary Kerr had authenticated the model and that he had purchased the model himself in a storage unit, purchased at an auction from the estate of filmmaker Burton Holmes, who died in 1958. Okay. Trek Movie acknowledges these were rumors. How did they get started? Well, let's take a look. The first thing I want to point back is when that comment was made on Trek Movie, Gary was moved to comment below. For the record, when friends asked me about the model, I said it looks real to me. But simply looking at 16 photos online does not constitute an authentication. You need a hands-on examination to be sure. And as for the rumor that I found the model in a storage unit that I had purchased, if anybody believes that, wow, do I have a bridge to sell you. Now, interestingly enough, the Gary authenticated the model rumor and the Burton Holmes rumor all appear to have started from the same quote on the same board. That night, while everything was hot and heavy and flowing around, I saw this. Gary Kerr has blessed it as authentic. I think this was one of the fastest authentications in history. Laugh out loud. Quote, it was found in a storage unit I bought from an auction. The unit belongs to a filmmaker named Burton Holmes. Okay. So I'd heard the Burton Holmes rumor too, and I even mentioned it up front in one of my earlier videos because Burton Holmes was also involved in yet another unique storage locker find about 15 years ago. But there's no real connection that anyone has actually been able to find between Burton Holmes and the eBay seller. More importantly, it's not clear where the quote came from that is in this particular posting. It is my belief that the first sentence is the poster's understanding of the situation. He believed it was authenticated. Interestingly enough, for him to include the underlining quotes below leads me to think that he might be mixing sources, because this actually looks like this is what Gary said. I'm quoting Gary. I think he's mixing two sources, but to be honest, it's been very difficult to find out because I can't even identify the source that the quote came from. You can see that sometimes even the most well-meaning individuals can end up obscuring an audit trail of facts just because of the way they said something or a misunderstanding that went out. This quote, I guarantee you, is how Trek Movie ended up with their comment about rumors circulating the Gary Kerr. And that quote goes back to this particular quote right here. The only thing I found that mixes two of them together, and I can't find any trace of Burton Holmes anywhere. And last, one of the most amazing fan theories that I've seen is pretty sweet. It's sort of like the Trek Movie thing. But you can take a look here on the same board about a day or so later. They were talking about, what happened to it, where was it, did it know it was stolen and everything. And up comes this particular person. And he says, I mostly agree. The only thing I do think is this person kind of knew what they had. The reason? This video from TrekWorld a mere 2 months ago. The thing was missing for 44 years, and then turns up 2 months after a video detailing its history comes out. I think the guy who had it found out about the video and promptly put it up with worry that it was stolen. Laugh out loud. And of course, he's referencing the video that I recently redid on the history of the model and how it was stolen. A couple interesting points I want to bring out. This video that you're seeing this image from right now is actually a repackaged version of a video I did a year and a half ago when this channel was called Weird Nashville. So I removed the Weird Nashville logos by sticking TrekWorld all over the place, updated the graphics and the thumbnail because I thought this thumbnail was much better than the previous one that I had, and I republished it. Did the buyer get triggered? Hey, I saw something in one of my storage kits and then I saw this video. Did the buyer get triggered? I don't know. Maybe the buyer did. But it's interesting that there's an implied connection between my video and it actually being brought up and available for sale. I would like to think that my videos are important enough that they could change Star Trek history. They're not, guys. It is just a coincidence. A flattering one, but still, just a coincidence.